Welcome to the Tazara News Network, an African news network by Africans. The economy of Zambia is now owned by foreigners. This was done in the name of foreign investment. Foreign investment was supposed to save the people of Zambia. The economy of Zambia had crashed in the early 1990s. And when the MMD government took over, they promised that foreign investment would save the people of Zambia and create economic opportunity. This did not happen because foreign investment is not the key to saving Zambia or any other African country. All foreign investment does is take the resources of the African people and transfer them into foreign hands. Foreign investment is a scam. The best way for a country to build its economy, especially a country like Zambia, is very simple. The government must fund indigenous businesses. There is no other way. That's the way it was done in Britain. That's the way it was done in France. That's the way it was done in the United States. The United States government, especially under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, funded the businesses of the individual people. They gave them money to buy businesses, they gave them money to buy houses, they built them infrastructure. This was all done at government expense. Taking the resources of a country and selling them to foreigners is crazy. This has never been done in any other place in the world, and it cannot work. All it does is impoverish the indigenous people.
One thing that keeps me puzzled, despite having studied finance and economics at the world's best universities, the following question remains unanswered. Why is it that 5,000 units of our currency is worth 1 unit of your currency, where we are the ones with the actual gold reserves? It's quite evident that the aid is in fact not coming from the West to Africa, but from Africa to the Western world. The Western world depends on Africa in every possible way, since alternative resources are scarce out here. So how does the West ensure that the free aid keeps coming? By systematically destabilizing the wealthiest African nations and their systems, and all that backed by huge PR campaigns, leaving the entire world under the impression that Africa is poor and dying and merely surviving on the mercy of the West. Well done, Oxfam, UNICEF, Red Cross, Life Aid, and all the other organizations that continuously run multi-million-dollar advertisement campaigns depicting charity porn to sustain that image of Africa globally. Ad campaigns paid for by innocent people under the impression to help with their donations. While one hand gives under the flashing lights of cameras, the other takes in the shadows. We all know the dollar is worthless, while the euro is merely charged with German intellect and technology, and maybe some Italian pasta. How can one expect donations from nations that have so little? It's super sweet of you to come with your colored paper in exchange for our gold and diamonds. But instead, you should come empty-handed, filled with integrity and honor. We want to share with you our wealth and invite you to share with us. The perception is that a healthy and striving Africa would not disperse its resources as freely and cheaply, which is logical. Of course, it would instead sell its resources at world market prices, which in turn would destabilize and weaken Western economies, established on the post-colonial free meal system. Last year, the IMF reports that 6 out of 10 of the world's fastest growing economies are in Africa, measured by their GDP growth. The French Treasury, for example, is receiving about $500 billion year in, year out. The foreign exchange reserves from African countries based on colonial debt they forced them to pay. Former French President Jacques Chirac stated in an interview recently that we have to be honest and acknowledge that a big part of the money in our banks comes precisely from the exploitation of the African continent. In 2008, he stated that without Africa, France will slide down in the rank of a third world power. This is what happens in the human world, the world we have created. Have you ever wondered how things work in nature? One would assume that in evolution the fittest survives. However, in nature, any species that is overhunting, overexploiting the resources they depend on as nourishment, natural selection would sooner or later take the predator out because it offsets the balance.
I have lived in the Western world for many years, in the United States, the richest country in the world. And believe me when I say, most people in America, most people in the Western world are working class people. They have bills to pay, they have mortgages to pay, they're barely surviving. Once they lose their jobs, then it's very easy for them to become homeless. Very few, only 1% of the people in the Western world are rich. Most people are just scraping by. They are simply surviving just like everyone else. So where does all the money come from? Where do all these foreign investors come with money to invest in Africa? It comes from their governments. The governments print the money, which they then use to buy the resources of the African people. The true wealth of this world, the resources of Africa. The West has no money. The West has been broke since at least the 1930s. This is why in 1933 the United States abandoned the gold standard. The gold standard meant that for every dollar that was in the US central bank, it had to be backed up by gold reserves. They could no longer afford to do that. They didn't have enough gold. They needed to print money in order to build their infrastructure and in order to fund the businesses, in order to create a middle class for their people. This is why they abandoned the gold standard. So if they abandoned the gold standard and if they print money, it means they have no money to give the African people. Which means that foreign investment is a scam. The only way for Africa to develop is for the African governments to fund the businesses of the African people, to fund the infrastructure which the African people need, roads, electricity grids, and everything else which makes a country modern. Getting the money from foreign investors is not the solution to the economic problems of Africa. The West has no money to give Africa. Everything that they give, from the Peace Corps and all those other things that you see, comes from printed money. This is the African governments can print money to build infrastructure and to fund the businesses of Africa, instead of getting printed money from overseas and selling our resources to foreigners. The only place where people give away their resources for colored paper is Africa. And until Africans realize that the West has no money to give them, Africans will remain poor. We must understand that we have to print our own money to build our own businesses.